There are 6 billion plus of us here now. We're talking more often, more frequently, and more regularly than ever. You don't believe that? Here are some people who are proof. Ben Ali, in Tunisia, his wife and family, thrown out after one angry man begins to fight back, who's immediately memorialized on social media, leading to hundreds of thousands of protesters, and then finally, generations of rule ended. It spreads like wildfire, heading east to a regime that has been there for over 30 years. President Mubarak, his son, heir apparent. Initial outcry at first, leading to mass demonstrations. Soon millions gather, brought together by social media, brought together by people using Twitter, Facebook, urging themselves to get organized, to rise up against the authority. It happens, preposterously, incredibly. What couldn't have been foreseen happens. Mubarak leaves. Where will it end? Who can say? Algeria? Libya? Syria? Jordan? Oman? Yemen? Bahrain? The House of Saud itself? Brian Spooner, a professor of anthropology at Penn, has studied this. We are going to talk about it. We're going to take your views too.
Okay, in this session of the Penn Globalization video blog, we want to start talking about what's actually going on in the world outside at the moment and try and make sense of it from the point of view of the study of globalization. Because our assumption is that a lot of things are happening in the world today that don't make sense except in the context of globalization. And obviously at the moment what's on everybody's mind is what's going on in Egypt. And it's easy to make sense of it on one level. We all recognize that it was an oppressive regime and there's a lot of poverty and people want things they can't have. But that doesn't explain why it's happening now. And I think that in the case of all situations like this, it's very important to have some sense of why it happened this week rather than last week or 5 years ago or 10 years in the future. Usually if you ask questions like that about Egypt and people have thought about it at all before, they will say, well, it was because of Tunisia, what, 10 days before? And then they'll, if you press them further, they'll perhaps refer to what's going on in all the other Middle Eastern countries, from Algeria at one end to Syria,
even Yemen now.
Well, Yemen definitely, where they all have oppressive regimes, and there have been incidents over the last couple of weeks which the government has put down. In some cases, as particularly in the case of Libya, next door to Tunisia, and Iran at the other end, the government has tried to interpret what's going on in Egypt and Tunisia as something that supports their authoritative rule. But they're all worried about it.
Oh, very much so.
So why should they all be worried now when they've been doing what they're doing for years and got away with it?
I'm struck by a couple of things. First of all, we're talking about secular regimes that were born roughly in the Nasser period, all right, with the overthrow of for lack of a better word, colonialistic rulers, King Farouk, you go right down the line. But almost from, not quite Morocco, but Algeria all the way to the east, right along that crescent, one after another, secular regimes, well-entrenched, Sunni regimes, Sunni Muslim regimes, who have a responsibility to their constituents to maintain order, maintain a safe government, maintain a safe place so the Islamic community can worship and attend to their religion and communal methods, which is what the responsibility of Sunni rulers are. So I'm struck by the fact that these regimes, which were initially revolutionary themselves, after passage of time, buttressed by the United States and the West for reasons that probably have as much to do with oil as anything else, and anti-communism, are all fracturing at the same time. It's like a contagion that's spreading right through.
What was the name of the man who ran against Obama in the last election? Arizona Senator?
John McCain.
John McCain said that it's a virus.
Well, that's as good a description as anything. But I don't think.
Except that it puts him on one side of the
debate.
debate.
Oh, it does. I don't think I have been as heartened by a political event than I have been by watching Obama win 10 primaries in a row in 2008. I have been thrilled with what's been going on. And I think I'm thrilled for two reasons. I'm thrilled for the fact that these are young people that are highly educated, that don't have jobs to go to, and are like crying out of frustration. And the second reason I'm thrilled is that contrary to what happened in Iran in 1978, there does not seem to be a push towards an Islamic fundamentalist kind of government. There seems to be a desire for democracy, for self-rule, and a continuance of whatever the secular tradition might have been. So I welcome, as an American, I welcome this as a very positive development. And I'm a little dismayed at the government right now for a go-slow approach. I would have suggested to Mubarak that it's long ago time to go.
The problem from Barack Obama's point of view is that Americans don't vote for people who promote democracy unless they see it as being successful. And he's got to appear to be successful starting a year from now.
Right.
So he's in a very difficult situation. And for that reason, I don't know what his agreement with Hillary Clinton is, but she said very early on that Egypt is stable because we need it to be stable for the next election. And everything that the US government has done, I think, has been on the basis of a policy that seeks to preserve the appearance of stability. Though Obama actually has made it very clear that he wants transition. So American foreign policy generally in the Middle East has been to preserve stability. And most of the time, since the Second World War, the way that has been done has been to maintain the status quo at any cost, and that has meant oppression.
And I don't think that can be done anymore.
And the reason it can't be done anymore is probably the same reason that is the explanation of why Obama won the election. Yeah. That is that the level of participation of a much larger proportion of the population in decisions that get made publicly has risen. So people who if we try to explain why somebody like Obama could win the American election in 2008 when nobody thought it was going to be possible, you have to look at the range of people who came together to support this new type of person. If you look at what's happening in Egypt, you see that there's a certain type of people who are promoting this, and it really took the people who support Mubarak by surprise, and they stayed at home for a while, and the regime didn't quite know what to do with it. In fact, the regime's reaction was, let them see what it's like with no law and order. We'll take the police off the streets. They'll soon want us back. And they didn't. They organized themselves.
How'd that work out for them? Not real well.
The people on the streets managed their own law and order, and they've been doing very well.
Now you have doctors, you have teachers, you have lawyers, you have everybody in that square. And on this coming Friday, they have announced plans to have 3 million demonstrators after the mosque services. So midday Friday is going to be a very heightened day there. Let me get back to a point. I think Obama, whom I'm a great admirer of, went to Cairo, made his speech in Cairo, the designated Islamic country, which I never would have permitted, although I can't imagine what an Islamic country he should have gone to. He could have probably gone to Indonesia. But went to Cairo and essentially dared the student audience at the University of Cairo, where he spoke, to embrace the values that he was espousing. Well, guess what? They called him on it. They called him on it. And the United States cannot be in a position now where it's backpedaling. I mean, we have to say, good.
Obama went to Cairo because for 1,000 years it's been the intellectual center of the Islamic world.
I know that,
and Indonesia, even though it may have the largest population of any Islamic country, isn't seen as the center of anything except its own particular part of the world. But when Obama went there, that was 18 months ago?
Yeah, perhaps, yeah.
Or nearly 2 years ago, in fact. Yeah. And it took a long time for something to happen. And it's true that the self-immolation in Tunisia did provide a spark, but the social tinder was already there in Egypt, so that when they saw that, that gave them the inspiration to actually start something. But it had taken a long while for people to begin to get into the mood to do something like that. Because after all, there have been riots against oppressive rule in Egypt since the British period.
Oh yes, there were riots against Sadat.
And people are not used to being successful, and they know that they're used to the idea that we'll riot and maybe we'll get some concessions, and then that'll be the end of it because they'll stop us. This time they're not being stopped.
And I think there's a feeling now that I'm an avid reader of Al Jazeera, who, despite having had their Cairo office ransacked, still has a good squad of reporters on the ground. What they're reporting from many of the demonstrators is that they know that this time they've gone too far. And it's almost like if you're going to revolt against the king, make sure you kill him. All right, if they fail now, they're afraid of what Mubarak's police are going to do.
Yeah.
And I would certainly sympathize with that.
Yeah.
They can't go back now.
So then we're left with the problem of why it started in Tunisia. And the way I would approach that is to argue that the population of Tunisia is probably more homogeneous and more highly educated than that of any of the other Arab countries, and certainly than Egypt. And also much more closely involved with what's going on in Europe. So it makes sense that the dam would burst there before the other countries.
It was an extraordinarily high level of unemployment, if I remember correctly.
Well, that's the problem everywhere, because the oppression is economic oppression as well as political oppression, and it inhibits the growth of the economy, and so there's no jobs because there's growth of population but not economic growth.
How far do you think this can go? How far eastward? I mean, a lot of the things you're discussing right now, in terms of oppression, in terms of economic inequality, in terms of education with the inability to get jobs. I mean, it sounds like you're describing places like Pakistan. Right? I mean, could it go that far east?
Well, Pakistan is in some ways ahead of them anyway.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
But the Egyptian army controls the Egyptian economy. The Iranian
Revolutionary
Guards control the Iranian economy. The Pakistani army controls the Pakistani economy. In fact, the Pakistani army is really the only national institution left. The PPP, the main political party, claimed to be a national party, but it's really lost any right to make that claim anymore. And the Pakistan Civil Service used to be a national organization, but that unfortunately has declined a lot as a result of what went on in the Zia period between the mid-70s and the mid-80s. So the problem with Pakistan is more whether it will fragment, because it's the intellectuals and the landholders in the big cities against the people who are fed up with them in the other parts of the country.
You know, you can't help, at least I can't help but look at all this without gaining an increased respect for the Ottomans. How did they manage to rule over this disparate area? It's just a miracle for so long, hundreds and hundreds of years, in a thriving manner.
Yes, they did very well up until the 18th century, and then things started to go downhill. And it was largely, I think, because of the, well, what always happens with autocratic situations like that is that they have dynastic problems, and not every, I mean, we have that problem in England. Not every person who's in line for the position is equally well qualified. But it's interesting that autocratic rule worked best for everybody in the 16th and 17th centuries, and then it went downhill everywhere. And it doesn't really work anymore. No. But the idea of democracy hasn't developed properly yet. And after all, how long have we had a democratic system in this country that everybody had an equal part in?
Certainly what is going to result is not going to be what we're familiar with in the West. And I think that
it's interesting, and it needs to be borne in mind when we think about things like this, that Islam is in fact a democratic system, but it's totally different from what we call democracy in America or the rest of the Western world. But it's set out 1500 years ago to be a system for the whole world in which everybody was equal, and where there would be no dominant authority.
No intermediary between the man and Allah.
Yeah, no pope.
Right.
Every individual was responsible for making his own decisions, and expected to go and get advice when he didn't understand, and get advice from a scholar. But if he didn't like what he was told by one scholar, he'd go and ask another one. That's the system for the majority of Muslims, the Sunni Muslims. The Shia, however, didn't like that. They wanted a single authority, and that's why Khomeini managed to develop the current system in Iran. But even that has an enormous range of checks and balances, which Ahmadinejad is doing his best to
skirt. Yes, he's quite shifty.
So what I would like to say in general about all this all these situations in the Middle East, which are beginning to look so uncertain for the first time in, well, since the Iranian Revolution, I suppose, is that Islam does provide a model for a global society, but Muslims haven't worked out how to run a global society in practice any better than we have. And there's as much internal disagreement, if not conflict, in the Islamic world about the best way to run things politically as we have in the Western world.
I'm hearkening back to the introduction in Richard Eaton's book about the beauty of the administration of the Caliphate, and how they in fact were running the world for a long period of time, very successfully, in a very balanced manner, with very democratic development upon everybody, with the real freedom of worship, the freedom of understanding your relationship to God, the freedom of expression in many ways. It was quite a beautiful thing. So.
And that was the period of growth.
That was the period of growth.
We've not worked out how to manage society without growth.
This is true too.
And we're now in a situation when things are growing so fast that we're
can't keep up with it.
Afraid of the speed, and we're not sure where it's leading. And that's what's leading so many people to try to hold on to the past and not give in to the growth.
And that's a reaction to globalization, to the increased speed of globalization.
Yeah.
As you said in our first show. Yeah. Well, this was fascinating. I can't wait to talk about next week's explosion, or wherever it may be.
Well,
So,
each time we meet, we'll pick a particular set of events of the past week's news and start from there.
that sounds good. All right. Well, thank you. Okay.